Okay, so can everybody hear me fine? Yes, yes? Okay, all right. So it was a wonderful 12-hour flight here to Amsterdam. This is actually my third time to Amsterdam. I love this country. Today I'm going to talk about blockchain applications in business scenarios. I think especially in the communities that I'm involved in, both in Asia as well as across the world, many people are still figuring out on more of the infrastructural or the crypto side of blockchain, and not necessarily in the business scenario. I think mainly because, in my opinion, blockchain came about with a bunch of hackers, right? And these hackers probably never ran large businesses. And in this case, right, the business scenarios didn't directly tie in. Now, a lot of financial industry are looking at this, and they're looking at this in a very slow, cumbersome elephant or dinosaur kind of way. In this case, right, a lot of business scenarios are not actually being pushed. But I happen to live in a country where actually there is no trust. I mean, China, there is no trust, right? In the United States, I could write a piece of paper, give it to Mark. Mark can cash it at a bank, and this becomes real money, right? But in China, you cannot do this. In China, I can even sign a document, and it's not even trustworthy. You have to chop it. You have to chop it with the right chop that is authorized with the right agency that is at the government, and then it's proven. And all of this costs people. Right, so today, the blockchain scenarios that I talk about aren't really innovative from, I would say, crypto or from a how to do distributed computing perspective. But it is more about how to, in business scenarios, what are some of the things that we optimize in order to enable some very creative uses of blockchain kind of digital assets in order to enable these business scenarios. Okay, so this is about me. I don't really need to introduce me. People could feel free to Google me, but I graduated from Stanford. I've been living in China for over 10 years. This is actually my second startup in China. The one before that was actually video games. The two startups before the video game startup was actually in communications. So nobody actually really sees the lines associated with this, but it is actually all cloud-based, right? So today, all of our Dianrong's infrastructure, including the blockchain infrastructure, is based on a hybrid cloud. So we have our own public and private clouds. So this is actually mainly to illustrate the FinTech space in the world. And the thing I want to point out is that actually over half of today's FinTech transactions happen in China. Why is that? It's because people, again, don't have trust, right? They don't have actually the right infrastructure and services. So they use mobile, they use applications. They are actually heavily populated, which in this case, right, a lot of transactions happen. Today, I can actually get around in China with nothing but a phone. But here I tried it today at Netherlands, and it was very, very hard. Actually, my credit card doesn't even have a chip, right? Because China's backwards, right? In that respect, right? So I can't even pay for my coffee. So thank you for whichever gentleman that paid for my coffee today, right? But to talk about China, right? It's heavily dense, right? So we're talking about the area that I live in. Shanghai is actually the most populated area. On a working day, there is over 1 million people in less than 2 square kilometers, right? So if you take a kilometer and you take 2 kilometers and you take the radius for that and the area of that, there's actually more than 1 million people that is actually living, working, and all that stuff. A lot of infrastructural transaction, last mile deliveries, and things like that. This is Dianrong. We started this company about 4 years ago. Luckily or gladly, we've made some people happy, like Mark, but hopefully we made more Chinese people happy. Here we do we have close to about 1 million customers onboarding every month, right? These are a combination of lenders and borrowers, at least in a registration perspective. Active customers are generally 1/3 of these numbers. We do about 2 billion RMB, or 2 to 3 billion RMB in transactions every month, and we've been growing, actually, if you see that, at a CAGR of 273% year over year, right? And actually, the first year it was crazy. The first year was like 300 to 400. So this is the environment we're living in. It's not like necessarily we just built a great company, but because we're in the right place at the right time, with a lot of people missing infrastructure, right? So imagine me going to the United States when I was young, and I saw the roads of LA, and I was like, wow, this was an amazing place. And I left from a place in China that actually even still had dirt roads and horse carts. And then in 2006, when I first went back to Shanghai, and I thought the United States was backwards, right? Because the Shanghai freeways were just crazy, right? There are big spirals everywhere with transferring 30 million people across the entire city. And this is actually what we have in the financial space as well. In China, there is not that many financial incumbents, which means the entire area is open. There is no HMOs. Nobody is actually going to fight with you over somebody's, installment payment over a dental plan, right? Over a pregnancy, operation, over any of this stuff, right? Nobody actually gives you a loan to buy an iPhone, right? To any kind of your, I would say, regular, white collar, right? Even or blue collar services the Chinese industry doesn't have, right? So today, all of these gaps are not replaced by banks because banks are very slow and they are very risk averse. But these actually are being replaced by companies, fintech companies like us. And I'll get to blockchain soon. All right, so at Dianrong, what we did is we, over our today, we have about 850 engineers. Publicly, we say we have about 600, but we just acquired a company. But in this case, right, we actually componentize and productize almost all of our pieces. So you can imagine infrastructure as a service, building on top of that is PaaS, right, platform as a service. There's all these different modules, electronic wallets, consolidation, electric stores, right? And blockchain was a piece of that, right? It started about 18 months ago when we said this was a cool technology and let's first solve the problem of contracts, right? It's a very simple problem, right? In case one day if Dianrong was not around and one lender is going to sue a borrower, they need something that is solid. And today all of our contracts are electronic contracts, so they need a way to keep it somewhere and be able to take it to a legal entity, right, or a government entity and be able to actually collect their money back. And it started with those kind of ideas, and eventually it resolved to more. Right, so about 18 months ago, I met Foxconn at a Morgan Stanley conference, and while talking to them, we also had a different issue. Our issue was a supplier of Foxconn came to us and asked us for a loan. Now, from a financial record perspective, we didn't know really who they were. Right? They showed us the nice little golden iPhone piece that they make for the gold iPhone. It's a volume button, right? But how do I really know they're a Foxconn supplier? There's no contract, no AR, nothing, right? They actually provide this to another supplier provides to another one. They're actually probably about 7 to 8 levels deep before they get to Foxconn. There's no way to prove that. And also they're very seasonal. As you can imagine, iPhone has hot season, has low season, and half the time, their workers goes back to the farms. How do you actually give this institution credit, right, to actually let them build the next, I don't know, your button for your iPhone 8? And that was actually a hard problem. We go to Foxconn and they say, hey, we have 100,000 suppliers. Every year we do $200 billion worth of account receivables on top of our supply chain. We don't know who this guy is. All right, so we cannot help you either. So we sat down and we looked and we said, hey, maybe there is a potential solution to that. It's essentially a problem of trust and a problem of information relay, and perhaps we could use something different. All right, so that actually then goes into the blockchain scenarios that I talked about. All right, so let's first focus on the supply chain example, and then I'll come back to these kind of things. Right, so what happens is when Foxconn gives an account receivable, they generally already receive the item, and they assemble this item to become your beautiful iPhone in your hands. Right, so in general, these level 1 suppliers can actually go to a bank and probably get Libor or somewhere between 6, maybe if they're bad credit, they could get 8% based on a collateral on their account receivable from Foxconn. Generally, this account receivable takes 90 to 180 days to clear, depending on the contract. None of this is digitized. Everything is done by paper. So in general, even for these creditworthy suppliers, they're big, right? So we're talking about millions of dollars in terms of account receivables. It takes minimally, generally about 2 work weeks, in order for them to even get the money, right? Now, of course, these suppliers are growing, right? They're building all these products, and they need to build the next iPhone, and they cannot, magically come up with money, and their cash flow short, right? So what they do is they need to transfer this to money, and then they use this money or issue account receivables to pay to their level 2, and then the level 2 pays to the level 3, and it goes all the way down to like 7, 8, and maybe even as old note, like basically debit notes to employees. Right? So we looked at this and we said, okay, so 85% of this entire chain within this $200 billion a year is unbanked. So how do we solve that problem? right? So we looked at the account receivables, right, the account payables of Foxconn, and we said, why don't we turn that into a digital asset on a blockchain? Now, what does this digital asset needs to have? It needs to have the right types of contracts. It needs to have the smart contract enabled on top of that in order for you to capture some scenarios. It needs to be passable. It needs to be splittable. These are all qualities of a blockchain digital asset that you can split. So the chain finance entity sits in the middle with the authorization, with the sole authorization of Foxconn, as well as, what we do is we then package these digital assets and we let the level ones to use this as technically as money, right? Or as ways to pay their level twos. And then the level twos, in order for them to pay, right, they can actually pay it to level threes and so on. And there's all these incentive factors in the middle, but each time when they split and they pay, they have to add in their business scenarios on top of that. Now, why is that good? Number one is that level one doesn't have to now trade it in 2 weeks, come back with real money, and then issue that as an account receivable or something, right? Or use that real money in order for level two to then take this to go to the bank again, right? And each time every level go to the bank, right, they actually add on to the credit. Well, the credit is harder to define, right? It's usually riskier, which in that case, right, their APRs goes up, right? So what we know is that level two generally is from anywhere from 10 to 12%. Level three, level four, right? By the time it gets to level 8 in China, sometimes it's 60%, and 60% APR if they're lucky. Right? Most of the time, they may not even get it, right? Most of the time, they have to go to shadow banks. Most of the time, they have to go to loan sharks in order to do this kind of business. So you can imagine all this inefficiency in the supply chain as well. With these incentives of passing down this digital assets and being able to split them, then a level A can technically go to a financial institution, and via the blockchain contracts stored on all of these transactions, they can actually now prove that they're directly related to a Foxconn contract, right, that builds your iPhone button. Which in this case, then the majority of the creditworthiness comes from actually the anchor, which is the Foxconn entity. And they actually get very, very, I would say, reasonable interest rates. Not as low as the level one, but still very, very reasonable. And this is actually the solution that we provide. And why would an anchor company like this? Because now they have actually even more visibility on how to optimize their own supply chain and how to actually, in this supply chain, provide enough financial backing, right, to people who need this, so that your iPhone 8 shipments don't actually get delayed, right? So this is actually, if you think about it, it's very, very simple, right? I think, in my opinion, actually most people who do blockchain in this room can probably do this business. But the problem is that where is your Foxconn anchor, and where is your understanding of this business coming from? And then how do you solve these business problems on top of this chain? So let me get to the business problem on top of this chain. All right, so if you look at the business problems on top of the chain, they're very different from crypto problems, right? So for example, there's something called categorized management node access, right? What does that mean? It means that, sorry, am I out of time?
That's a little thing. The red is not good.
Okay, so let me go super quick. All right, so essentially here, right, you need to give authorization. You need to be able to lock up your information, which is your contracts, right? Your enterprise contracts are very, very secret. And you need to lock it up in a safe where the key is in your hands, and you need to give it to the right person at the right time, but not all the time, right? So you need management access nodes associated with that. What about fast, trust access? Again, in terms of blockchain, right, you don't actually have to have the whole entire set of network and node to vote, right? Again, it's a trust-based service, right? So if 4 of us trust each other, as long as 4 of us votes correctly, then, it's actually a statement, and the financial transaction can occur. So you can think about from the business scenario, you don't actually have to solve the big, long-tail problems that either lies with Bitcoin or Ethereum or even Hyperledger. You actually just then have to adapt it to the business scenario. So quickly, let me talk about a different scenario maybe other people could understand, and this is something that we talked about earlier. So for example, we just did a hackathon with TechNode, right, TechCrunch in Shenzhen with a company called Mobike. This company company does bike sharing, and they have about 50 million daily active users in China. Now, you think this is a big number, but really in China, this is just the starting point, right? Now, these 50 million users, today, they do a centralized model where they have a coupon, or they give their bike rider when they stop near a Starbucks to go to the Starbucks and get a 5 RMB discount. Right, now the Starbucks costs a lot in China. And this is a centralized model where they had to negotiate with Starbucks and actually connect the business model, right? And in order for this to trade. Now what Starbucks does is Starbucks kicks back Mobike about 95 RMB because that's the cost of the customer acquisition associated with it. Now this is a centralized model. What we said was, why don't we make this on top of the blockchain? Right? Why don't we have this to be a digital coupon with smart contract enabled, right? So anybody like Starbucks can join the blockchain. Right now it's an alliance chain, right? That matches to the right criteria that Mobike has on top of this digital coupon, and be able to actually then take this coupon in and then kick back the 95 RMB to Mobike. So suddenly you have this 50 million users, daily active users that could be tapped by every single business that is willing to come onto this blockchain. Right? So imagine that, right? That is actually the decentralized aspects, the power of what we see in terms of blockchain and how that enables business scenarios. It removes your chopping, it removes all this stuff, and actually enables a wider range of business scenarios. I know I'm way over my time, so I will go to questions.
No, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I really hate to stop you because you do real numbers. Okay, I mean it's super interesting to have an 8-layer deep supply chain that you help to become more creditworthy, so you can do peer-to-peer, which is growing at 300%, and you think that 15 million people 50. On a bike with
50.
Oh yeah, you think that 50 million are small numbers. I mean, it's just we're such a boring continent. What do you? I mean, you think that the US is backwards, but what do you think about Europe?
I love the air here. I mean, today I can smell the grass, and this is a treat for me because in China I don't smell that. I think it's harder to displace well-established infrastructure if it works, even though it works at a slower speed. Mm-hmm. But in China you don't have anything, which in that case, then it gives the chance to leapfrog, and eventually these innovations will come back. Right? So I see China at the forefront of financial innovation, and these innovations will a lot of smart people here will eventually look over there and say, hey, if they can make this work, why can't we make it work here? Yeah. And then be able to adapt it. I don't actually think a Chinese company can come here and solve these problems, right? Because these problems are related to how people do business, how people are socially adapting, and all of these things, but the ideas, the way tech is built could be actually transported over here. So I think we're entering an age where China is no longer just copying from the United States or from elsewhere, but it's reverse, right? You can see the trend of different companies actually going back to China and starting businesses over there, and in order to learning and bringing that back. Right?
Yeah. And you say that there's not so much trust in the Chinese society?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah,
it's really. I wonder why. But I mean, it's just I can imagine. So, if you see that if trust is important in a society, so blockchain as a way where trust is built in is really a building block which people are now speaking up a lot. Is it a popular subject? Because I hear there's blockchain seminars everywhere. Yes. Somebody complained.
Yes.
You cannot go to a theater anymore. You can only go to a blockchain conference.
Yeah, it's very hard. I personally even think the amount of VC money that goes into China in blockchain significantly outnumbers. I think Mark is better to answer that question. I'd also see a lot of government entities actually investigating in blockchain. Actually, just a few weeks ago when we're talking to the central bank, they are actually thinking about how to blockchain and digitize the RMB currency. So if this was going to happen as a currency being digitized, an official governmental currency digitized, I think it would probably happen in China faster than most other countries.
Yeah. And also, does anybody know how many RMBs in a euro? About 8 or 10?
Yeah, it's close to 10, I think.
8 or 10. So if you were talking about buying a cup of coffee, yes. Okay? I'm having this having this bike. I basically scan my bike and drive around, and then you're going to bombard me with advertising. How much is a cup of coffee at Starbucks?
It's about 35, 40 RMB.
Yeah, so it's the same price as here. And then they pay 4 times as much for the privilege of serving that customer. That's basically the cost of acquisition.
I mean, the acquisition cost is very expensive. I mean, if everybody should know this, right? So especially for an
China,
offline store.
Also, I mean, extremely. So the prices
yes.
are. Yeah. So Ling is here, for the drinks and and he's going to stay for this dinner. And I mean, just grab him because he has so many interesting stories. And we're going to interview you and get a bunch of other stories. Okay. But we're very happy that you're here. And I'm sorry I couldn't give you 2.5 hours on stage, but thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
Okay.